Well, we're joined now by Sharon Evans for her first television interview since she joined the current inquiry panel to represent abuse victims. She wrote to the Home Secretary last month urging her not to undo the progress of the panel so far. And let's just clarify where you think you are tonight. I mean, have you been wound up?
Well, the letter from the Home Secretary said there are three choices. So that's why I wrote to the Home Secretary to urge her not to scrap the panel. But we have been told by one of the advisors off the record that we were to get on with our lives and that we could reapply for our jobs as long as we don't say anything, was the inference.
Now, as Becky has indicated in that report, and as we know, you've actually been sitting already for, what, 3 months? How much testimony have you now heard?
We've heard a lot of evidence. We've been going out around the country, meeting victims and survivors, and I am a survivor myself. And I took the decision to give my own testimony to the panel, which I gave in great detail, which I've never done before, and to speak publicly at the listening events, because I felt that, well, I know that trust is a key thing if you're a survivor. But I felt confident to do that because we were promised by the advisors to the Home Office when Fiona Woolf went that this panel was here for the duration. So we were told we could go out and tell survivors that they could have confidence in this process. And I said, I'm a broadcaster, I'm not any way associated with the establishment, and I said that if I felt at any point that the panel was not independent, that I would speak up. And when we were called in by advisors and told that the panel was going to be scrapped before the 14th of January, how is it possible for it to be an independent panel if it can just be scrapped? So what happens when the next panel's set up? Right.
I mean, the difficulty is that 60 or 70 of the survivors have actually urged the winding up of the panel. So, I mean, how do you deal with that?
The letters that have been written, many of the people that have signed those letters are not, in fact, survivors. They're professionals that are associated with it. I feel that the Home Secretary needed to be aware of the meetings that we've been having, and we've met over 70 people who represent hundreds of survivors, potentially thousands, and 90% of those, in all the feedback that was gathered by the Secretariat, once they had met us, said that they had confidence in the panel.
Well, I mean, the problem, as Becky illustrates very, very deeply, is that the very nature of what happened has smashed these people's lives and smashed their confidence. Suddenly they're promised an inquiry. And now that confidence in that inquiry seems to have been broken. So is she perhaps well advised not to have any more to do with any inquiries?
This is why I'm urging the Home Secretary not to disband the panel. There are 2 survivors on the panel, myself and Graham, and we have trusted in this process. And I'm asking the Home Secretary to keep her promise to us as survivors and the survivors who've already engaged in the process.
But forgive me, it's too late, isn't it? I mean, effectively, you know the panel's going to be wound up. She has more or less said as much. And I mean, she has to appoint another one, and then would you have confidence in another one?
Well, how could you have confidence in another one? And I was actually told that if I spoke up that advisors would brief against me. So I'm fully expecting that to happen. And I find that very worrying. How can any panel that can be spoken to in that way be independent?
Well, look, just supposing she's listening, or at least her advisors are, what do you want done? Do you want the current panel sustained? Who do you want to chair it?
I want a chair to be appointed. We were promised that early in the new year a chair would be appointed there would be consultation, they've got 100 names, and that this panel would be able to get on with its job. And I am asking the Home Secretary to honour her promise to the survivors on the panel and to the survivors who've already engaged in this process.
Do you have any sense that any survivors now have confidence that this government, that all parties are committed to getting this thing resolved?
Well, I think we need an all-party committee of MPs for the panel to report to, because that's the only way it can be independent. And I think that the independence of the panel is what is required, and that's why I'm speaking out tonight, because I feel it's a matter of public interest.
Sharon Evans, thank you very much for coming in.